A U.S. media outlet suggests a small number of North Korean troops sent to Russia is already inside Ukraine, going beyond what has so far been officially confirmed. Against this backdrop, South Korea's Defense Intelligence Agency has raised the possibility of another nuclear test and a long-range missile test by North Korea around the presidential election timing in the U.S. With the U.S. election only a few days away, we take a look at any post-election impact on South Korea, from the situation of the alliance to North Korea issues and trade policies. It's October 30th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. A U.S. report says a compact contingent of North Korean troops is already inside Ukrainian territory, which could further escalate tensions if confirmed. Yoon starts us off.
A CNN report published Tuesday U.S. local time cited two Western intelligence officials who claimed that a small unit of North Korean troops is already in Ukraine. The officials expect the number to increase as North Korean military forces finish training in eastern Russia and move toward the front lines of the conflict. This information goes beyond confirmation provided earlier by the U.S. government.
As we highlighted earlier this week, we believe that the DPRK has sent approximately 10,000 soldiers in total. A portion of those soldiers have already moved closer to Ukraine towards Russia's Kursk Oblast near the border with Ukraine, approximately a couple thousand, with a smaller number already present in the Kursk region.
While the U.S. government said it does not have information to address reports of North Korean forces in Ukraine, it expressed concerns about potential developments and noted that it is closely monitoring the situation.
We are concerned that they do intend to employ these forces in combat against the Ukrainians, or at least support combat operations against the Ukrainians in the Kursk region.
This follows an earlier claim by the Lithuanian NGO Blue Yellow, which has been assisting Ukraine's military, that the first encounter between Ukrainian troops and North Korean military forces occurred on October 25th in Russia's Kursk region, leading to the death of all but one North Korean. U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday also expressed concerns about the presence of North Korean troops in Russia, stating that if they cross into Ukraine, Ukraine should respond with force. On the same day, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller criticized Russia and North Korea, stating that the deployment of North Korean troops marks a significant escalation in the DPRK's ongoing involvement in Russia's illegal actions and another breach of UN Security Council resolutions. Yoon, Arirang News.
South Korea's support for Ukraine will remain unaffected by the result of the U.S. presidential race. Remarks to this end were shared by the top office on this Wednesday in response to questions by the press poll here about the possibility of a shift in stance by Seoul in the event of former President Donald Trump returning to the White House. The Yongsan presidential office has vowed unwavering support for Kyiv, as the stance is in line with Seoul's own interests. Separately, a special Ukrainian envoy to South Korea is expected to arrive soon, assigned with the task of strategic bilateral partnership in light of North Korea's troop presence in Russia's war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, North Korea may conduct its 7th nuclear tests and launch a long-range missile around the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Kim Bo-kyung shares the details.
South Korea's Defense Intelligence Agency warns of a possible 7th nuclear test by North Korea, the first in 7 years, saying the regime has completed internal preparations at its Punggye-ri nuclear test site in Hangyeom-bukdo province. Such an assessment came during a closed-door parliamentary audit of the National Assembly Intelligence Committee that took place on Wednesday. The agency noted that the reclusive regime may stage provocations in a variety of ways around the U.S. presidential election.
North Korea is expected to try to highlight nuclear issues before the U.S. presidential election. Kim Jong-un has already inspected uranium enrichment facilities, and there is the possibility of launching missiles like SLVs, ICBMs, and ballistic missiles. A 7th nuclear test cannot be ruled out either.
The agency also raised the possibility of the North launching an ICBM-class long-range missile. Though the missile has not been mounted on a transporter erector launcher, the regime is said to have completed preparations for the mobile launcher, which has been deployed to a certain area, though a specific region cannot be named.
Since TLs have been deployed in certain areas, there could be an ICBM launch to verify the re-entry technology. It could be in November, either before or after the U.S. presidential election.
Meanwhile, regarding North Korean troops dispatched to Russia, the military intel agency reported that troop mobilization toward battlefields, including to the Kursk region, appears to be imminent, and that there is a possibility that some advanced units have been sent to the front lines. To some of the reports of North Korean casualties on the front line, the agency said there is no information to support such claims. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And against the backdrop of heightened tensions on the war front in Ukraine, top defense officials of Seoul and Washington are scheduled to sit down at the Pentagon on Wednesday local time for their annual security talks. Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun and his U.S. counterpart Lloyd Austin will be holding their 56th Security Consultative meeting, their first in-person exchange since Kim took office last month. Topping the agenda this year will be North Korea's troop transfer to Russia. Meanwhile, the two defense officials will then join their diplomatic counterparts on Thursday for their 2+2 meeting, the first in about 3 years. And North Korean troop presence on the front lines of Russian aggression against Ukraine has prompted Western leaders to share their concern over the future course of Moscow's military offensive. The Kremlin, in the meantime, has announced a strategic nuclear training exercise. Yoon has more.
On Tuesday, NATO's new Secretary General Mark Rutte met with EU President von der Leyen, during which they discussed the war in Ukraine and called it the biggest threat to peace and security on the continent. And for the first time, NATO confirmed the deployment of North Korean troops to Russia and their operation in the Kursk border region. Rutte said the confirmation was based on weeks of intelligence reports and a meeting with South Korean security and defense officials on Monday. He added that the recent deployment of North Korean troops to support Russia posed a serious threat, which represented a significant escalation and a dangerous expansion of Russia's war in Ukraine. And world leaders are voicing their concerns over the situation. After a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said in a press conference that North Korean activity, both in terms of arms exports and especially the sending of troops to Russia, was escalation, expansion, and provocation.
My own analysis is, this is my analysis, not the words of the president, is that for China, the Chinese-North Korea relationship is not very comfortable at the moment. Because as a matter of fact, it can lead to escalation.
On Tuesday, the Pentagon also confirmed that of some 10,000 North Korean troops sent to train in eastern Russia, a portion of them have already moved closer to the Kursk region. Spokesperson Major General Patrick Ryder said that there was still no information on how the North Korean troops will be used in operations against Ukraine or if they have crossed the border yet. Meanwhile, as Western leaders continue to express concerns over any movement threatening escalation, the Kremlin released a video on Tuesday in which Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a new strategic nuclear training exercise.
Today, we are conducting another exercise of strategic deterrence forces. We will work out the actions of officials in controlling the use of nuclear weapons with practical launches of ballistic and cruise missiles.
Putin added that Russia would stick to its principled position of using nuclear weapons as a last resort in ensuring the security of its country, and that it was not looking to be involved in a new arms race. But Putin also emphasized the importance of having modern and constantly ready-to-use strategic forces, and that it would maintain nuclear forces at the level of necessary sufficiency. Yoon, Arirang News.
In other news, a surviving Korean victim of Japan's wartime forced labor has accepted the Korean government's plan to compensate its own citizens who were forced to work in Japanese factories during World War II. Lee Chun-sik, who is now 102 years old, received on Wednesday the compensation and delayed interest payments from a public foundation that operates under the Foreign Ministry, making him the last surviving victim to do so. Lee was forced to work under harsh conditions at a Japanese steel mill in the 1940s during Japan's colonial rule of Korea, but he had to return to Korea without being paid after Japan lost the war. The so-called third-party compensation put forth by the South Korean government in March 2023 has been met with criticism by some forced labor victims and civic groups, saying it does not hold Japan accountable. Over in the U.S., a big political event is just around the corner. And our political correspondent, Lee Si-hoo, joins us in the studio to talk about the potential impact of the presidential election on South Korea. First, Si-hoo, what do predictions look like?
Yes, so it's an exceptionally close race to the White House. The latest polls show Harris and Trump neck and neck in many states, and narrow victories in just a handful of what are called battleground swing states will likely determine the winner. A recent national poll by Reuters and Ipsos shows the Democrats ahead by a single percentage point over the Republicans, 44% to 43%. Other polls also show either Harris or Trump win, but basically in a statistical tie considering the margin of error.
And how will the overall outcome of the election impact the U.S. trade policies on South Korea?
Right, so I've spoken with a number of experts on this, and they say this in comment. Under the Trump administration, many uncertainties and a continuation of Biden policies under Harris. Trump insists on the America First policy as he had during his previous term. Let's listen in to a trade expert analysis.
In the case of Trump, regardless of whether it's isolationism or nationalism, it's a form of national priority that doesn't really consider the alliance. So Trump may impose high tariffs on all cars. South Korea and the other allies cooperate in the battery supply chain, and we can sell the US, for example, our positive electoral materials we produce, but Trump may not really keep in consideration this kind of alliance.
While Trump's policy is probably applicable in all sectors, Harris and the Democrats, based on their previous stance in the Biden administration, will likely focus on a few selected areas for cooperation.
Well, Harris and the Democrats value the alliance, and we are an ally of the US. Although the US emphasizes domestic production in certain sectors for national profit, the US does cooperate in other sectors when it's needed.
Dr. Cho explains such sectors include cutting-edge semiconductor technologies and electric cars. Now, in terms of the security alliance, Trump in his campaign has repeatedly called for greater financial input from the Korean government. The Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade predicts South Korea could expect not only an increase in defense costs, but also less cooperation in defense and weapons technologies.
And Si-hoo, what changes do we expect in terms of foreign and diplomatic policies on the Korean Peninsula?
So as with the trade policies, we expect to see Harris put in more effort into improving the ROK-US alliance, which is especially crucial right now when North Korea is deploying its soldiers to help Russia in its war efforts.
So I think we're going to expect to see that further continue under a Harris administration. But I think they're really going to be working towards how to optimize the ROK-US alliance to deal with this unprecedented challenge by North Korea in Russia and their collaboration.
Dr. Lee explains there may also be more multilateral partnerships with other U.S. allies, including Australia and Canada, who may come together in the absence of a UN Security Council member from Russia. But in case of a Trump win, there may be a, quote, big demand.
We will obviously expect a massive crisis in cost-sharing negotiations. President Trump has been very clear that he does not think the current arrangement is satisfactory. On the campaign trail, he's talked about $5 billion, even $10 billion in terms of special measures agreement renegotiations. So there's going to be a very big demand coming.
And Trump's North Korea policies may depend on how Kim Jong-un and the regime approach the new administration.
it really depends on whether Kim Jong-un approaches him with flattery or with, fire and fury and more nuclear, threats. So I think that will really depend, but that will shape and take place within what Russia and China are already doing. So it's not going to be happening in a vacuum.
How will Seoul respond once the new administration launches?
Right, so experts suggest that the key to making this coming change an opportunity for South Korea, obviously, is to create areas where South Korea becomes irreplaceable. That may be in technologies or products that South Korea leads globally, and use the strength to make it hard for any administration to impose restrictions, but instead encourage investments in South Korea. This kind of leverage can also influence our diplomatic relations, where much of its part is intertwined with trade policies. We could also initiate preemptive talks with the U.S. government to negotiate the schedule for potential export restrictions and exemptions.
All right, thank you, Shihu. Do keep us updated.
Thank you, Jung-min.
Celebrating a milestone for one of his key policies, the return to nuclear power, President Yoon says nuclear power has been the foremost contributor supporting South Korea's economic growth and prosperity. On Wednesday, he attended the completion ceremony of Shinhanul nuclear reactor units 1 and 2, as well as the groundbreaking ceremony for units 3 and 4. He also mentioned that South Korea's consortium became the preferred bidder to build the Dukovany nuclear power plant, saying more projects will come and that a nuclear renaissance has started. He also pledged more investment for R&D in the sector, including for SMR development, and to create more jobs in the industry. South Korea's relationship with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations dates back 75 years, and in light of this occasion, our An Sung-jin takes a closer look at their ties over the years.
From recipient to donor, South Korea's relationship with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations has changed dramatically over the past 75 years. The country is now one of the FAO's major donors, contributing to food security and sustainability for developing countries. The two have fostered a mutually beneficial partnership to achieve mutual growth and innovation for agricultural development.
FAO will continue to work closely with its members, particularly the government and the people of the Republic of Korea, for more efficient, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable agri-food system.
The FAO specializes in efforts to tackle hunger and achieve food security so people have regular access to sufficient high-quality food. South Korea has funded multiple FAO projects that work towards strengthening that capacity for developing countries. This program officer in charge of the Green Jobs for Rural Youth Employment Project, an ROK-funded FAO project which has been implemented by Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, and Timor-Leste, says that sustainability as well as implementing partners and international cooperation play a key role in facilitating these initiatives.
In order for things to be successful, we've really had to work with local governments. It's incredibly important for them to buy in and support projects, but it's really local government in local communities and districts who are on the ground making the action work.
The FAO emphasizes policy making, capacity building, and technological development as ways to bring economic advances and agricultural progress to countries in need. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
A documentary film about RM, the leader of the K-pop boy band BTS, will be released in 90 countries worldwide, including South Korea, next month. His agency Big Hit Music announced on Wednesday that the movie titled RM Right People, Wrong Place will officially be released in theaters on December 5th. The film depicts 8 months in the life of the musician as he prepares and produces his second solo album, Right Place, Wrong Person, and explores his personal thoughts and struggles. The movie was first screened at the 29th Busan International Film Festival on October 7th. Up next, Korea boasts some of the most scenic sights of autumn hues around this time of the year. Our Park Go-nu shares with us a number of such sights.
Autumn's vibrant colors invite you to the breathtaking scenery. At this time of year, people usually visit mountains and parks to see fall foliage turning red, yellow, and more. Whereas leaves change colors and usually reach their peak from mid to late October, there's a different situation this year, and it's due to climate change.
Fall foliage color changing is at least 2 to 3 days later on average. Summer was longer than before, and the temperature rose by around 1.3 degrees Celsius compared to the average of the past decades.
The same expert also said that leaves could fall earlier than expected due to strong winds and colder weather down the road. Still, there are many options nationwide to enjoy fall foliage, as the peak season for major mountains is several days later compared to the earlier forecast by the Korea Forest Service. The organization says that only 20% of the leaves on Naejangsan Mountain, for example, in the south of the country, had changed colors by last week. Since the organization sets the peak season as when at least 50% of the foliage changes its colors, it's estimated it could be early November or even a bit later. I'm currently at Yeonsan Mountain Provincial Park located in Gapyeong-gun County in Gyeonggi-do Province northeast of Seoul, where you can enjoy an amazing view of fall foliage. This place is a very peaceful place where you can enjoy birds chirping along with the sound of the water from the valley, and there's also a fresh breeze. Many visitors also visited this area that's been chosen as one of the 5 best forest paths for leaf peeping this year by the KFS.
A few days ago, I visited a different mountain because I heard that place had reached peak season, but it hadn't. But this place was really nice with a lot of maple trees, so it made me lose track of time.
This year, the autumn leaves are late, so people said it's not that pretty. But this place is good because it's close to the city and was so beautiful from the entrance.
And as the southern part of the peninsula usually reaches its peak later than the upper areas, planning in advance is recommended to enjoy a vibrant autumn. Park Go-nu, Arirang News, Gapyeong.
With clear skies, the whole country stayed mild with temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius. However, with smoke from overseas, the concentration of ultrafine dust in the Seoul metropolitan area in Chungcheongnam-do province will rise to bad levels overnight. This dust will gradually clear up from tomorrow afternoon. Daytime temperature in Seoul will rise to 22 degrees tomorrow. As the daily temperature ranges as wide as more than 10 degrees, you should take a warm jacket with you on your way to work. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at 9 degrees, Daejeon, Daegu, and Gyeongju 10 degrees. Daily highs will move up to at least 20 degrees all over the country. There's rain forecast in Jeju Island and the southern parts of the country on Friday, and in Gangwon-do province on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.